I'm here inside our carriage house, and we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the history of this carriage house and carriage houses in general. So carriage house is about what the name implies. It's a building used for housing carriages, particularly around the turn of the century. Typically, a carriage house would have sliding doors for the carriage to go in and out, sometimes stalls for horses, and oftentimes a hay loft for hay for the horses as well. So sounds a lot like a barn, and in fact when we first moved to the property we used to call this the barn until we understood a little more about the property itself. So a carriage house is different from a barn in a couple different ways. One, a barn tends to face out into the pasture, whereas a carriage house would face the road, because the carriage house's purpose is to aid in transportation. Carriage house also tends to be very close to the road for the same purpose. And generally speaking, when you see a carriage house, it's going to have architectural features that really don't belong on a barn. So it may appear to the road to be closer to a house than a barn. And actually sometimes, particularly in the Northeast, architectural features that were prominent on the house were featured on the carriage house as well. So that's Rockfish Gap Road, originally a trail, later a dirt road, and now a paved road, and they've moved that road back a bit. So actually the road used to be a lot closer to this building. You can't see it, but there's a stone wall there that's been there for many years, and we actually heard stories of somebody's father used to sit on that wall and get excited when he'd see a car come through. Not like that now, we get plenty of traffic. As you come through and you see, this is the front of the carriage house, again, facing the road. I talked about those architectural features. You may remember when we saw the main house over there, the columns. So, don't belong on a barn, more typical of a residence, and again tied to the columns on the main house. And this property actually made extensive use of columns throughout the property, and we called them on the label as well. If you take a look at your bottle of Carriage House that hopefully you're getting ready to drink, you'll see on the 7 you'll see those columns situated prominently there as well. So let's go on in the carriage house and drink some wine. So, welcome to the Carriage House. Todd and Andrew here, this time in the Carriage House. So it's a beautiful spring day, little bit of chill in the air, especially here in the Carriage House. So I'm not feeling a rosé and I'm not feeling a white. I'm thinking it's more of a red day, something with a little bit of structure and tannins to it, and I suspect Andrew's not going to disappoint here. So Andrew?
I've got just what you need, Todd. So that's why we're here in Carriage House. We're going to taste the 2015 Carriage House. And first thing that I would recommend you do is, if you have it, grab a decanter, grab your bottle of wine, and throw that wine in that decanter. Now, it's a really nice wine, but when you're putting it in the decanter, don't be afraid. Just go ahead and throw it in there. You want a couple things to happen while you're decanting. You're putting it in the decanter, to just give it a little bit of oxygen. It's been stored away, sealed, secure in that bottle for a little bit of time. Now it's time to open it up, let that wine breathe, showcase. By being in a decanter, you're going to get a little bit more surface area, more contact with oxygen, and that's just going to release a little bit more of these aromatics and flavors that we are anxiously anticipating. So, give it a couple minutes, give it a good swirl inside the decanter, let that breathe, let that wine open up for All right, so in true amateur fashion, we had a minor wardrobe malfunction. So sorry for the break in things. It's just a purely set design thing. If you didn't notice, I had some straw hanging from my shirt. So anyway, let's talk about wine again for as long as we can. I think what I was saying was that you're letting the wine breathe in the decanter a little bit to open up and expand for optimal tasting experience. Get the most out of the aromatics, the most out of the palate. And then another thing that you're going to get from decanting, another benefit, especially with our Carriage House 2015. One thing that we've noticed is quite often there's a lot of sediment in there, and it's a total natural occurrence. There's nothing wrong, there's no fault with having sediment in the bottle, but by decanting it, it just lets that sediment fall down to the bottom a little bit more rather than being so concentrated in the bottle. So don't be shocked if you get a little sediment. It's just a reflection of the winemaking style that we do, and totally natural.
And so you may have noticed when you actually pulled the cork on this wine, there would have been a little bit of sediment on the cork. Again, that's what we're talking about. If you didn't see it, look at the label and make sure you open the Carriage House.
Exactly. All right, we ready to taste?
Let's do it.
Go ahead, serve yourself.
Thank you.
Pour a little bit. So Carriage House 2015, I'll talk about the blend a little bit. So Carriage House, typically a little bit more of our medium-bodied Merlot dominant blend. So 2015, this is a blend of 89% Merlot, 11% Cabernet Franc. This one I really enjoy. It's expressive, it's very aromatic. So hopefully you've got some in the glass now. Give it a nice extra swirl. I know it's been sitting in the decanter now, but give it a little bit more movement. So again, stick your nose in there and get ready for an aromatic experience. This one is really great. I really enjoy the aromatics on this, just the introduction that you get from this wine. It's bright, it's inviting. You get some really nice bright red fruit notes, a bit of raspberry, a little bit of cherry. The oak influence, you get a little bit of a kind of a vanilla note to it as well. And so let me take a pause here and tell you a little bit about our winemaking style. So in general, with the reds that we produce, we use all French oak, and we do that for a couple of reasons.
Well, one, our original winemaker, Sebastian Marquet, from Burgundy, very French, and whenever we talked about using any other kind of oak, he was having none of it. So for peace, we use French oak.
Yeah, and for, overall, quality is, when you're talking about wine, you immediately think of French wine. So, traditional French wines, old world style, that French oak, the quality is incredible. So we use a few different types of French oak, all French oak, but from different coopers. And if you're a member of our barrel club, you're going to be able to get a really unique, cool experience of tasting some of those different barrels when we do your barrel selection. With the 2015 Carriage House, this was aged in French oak for 18 months, and we typically do our aging in oak in thirds. So a third of the oak is new French oak, a third is 1 to 2 year old oak, and then a third is neutral oak. So it's 3+ years old. So with those stages in the oak, you're getting different flavor profiles and characteristics. Obviously with new oak, you're gonna get the most amount of flavor from that new fresh oak that's being used. 1 to 2 year old, you're still getting a little bit of flavor, not quite as much. It's gonna be a little bit more mellow. And then neutral oak, even less. You still might get a little bit of extraction, but at the same time, it's a vessel. It's a great vessel to be able to put the wine in, get a little of that oak influence. So that's kind of been our approach to oak aging so far.
Yeah, and we kid around about the French oak, but in truth, as you think about, we're drawing oak from probably 9 different coopers and forests in France. And then as Andrew talked about, you've got new oak, you've got used oak, you've got neutral oak. So those of you better in math than I am can think through all the options in front of a winemaker when the harvest comes in, and how you're going to impart different flavors from different types of oak, different types of barrel, and different toasts on top of that. So some oak may be toasted differently than others, and so you've got light toast and medium toast and heavy toast. So all those things really come into play when you're determining your oak program on wine. And Sebastian and James would both argue that French oak imparts a little softer feel as opposed to American oak, which might be a little heavier on the oak.
Yep, exactly. So as we kind of step forward, let's taste this, and let's continue to talk a little bit about the oak and the influence and the profile of this wine. So again, start with a nice sniff, get a nice nose full. On that palate, again, this one's going to be a little bit brighter, a little more tannic structure, a little more vibrant mouthfeel, get a little of that herbal tone from that Cabernet Franc, but overall just warm, inviting, really refreshing. So another characteristic that you're getting on this one compared to other reds that you'll try in coming weeks, the palate is a little bit brighter. You get a little bit more of that tannic structure, and a big influence of that is the oak barrels that we've decided to use for Carriage House. So the overall profile of Carriage House is intended to be more like this, very aromatic, Merlot driven, a bit higher tannic profile. So then we're looking at the oak barrels that are going to impart some of those characteristics. So we're looking at specific coopers, specific forests and toasts that are going to contribute that type of profile for this particular wine. When we drink and taste Clover Plains and Coleman and Manor, it's a different kind of organization and allocation of oak for a different profile.
So let's talk a little bit about the fruit then.
Sure.
What's interesting about this particular wine, 2015, this is the first wine that we produced solely from grapes here on the estate. So in 2014, that was our first wine, but that was all from a different vineyard. So we were pretty excited and nervous about what we were going to come up with in this first year. And I remember in particular talking with Sebastian at the time, and he was wondering how the Merlot was going to come through on this property. And he was almost giddy after he was playing with it for a little while and said, boy, we're going to make some beautiful wines from the estate fruit. This 89% Merlot, 11% Cab Franc. You've got the clay soils here on the farm, and I always think of those clay soils as driving a bright red kind of fruit. So you'll get, I think Andrew mentioned, a little bit of raspberry, strawberry on this. Beautiful fruit flavors. And then you've got a little bit of that pepper coming through from the Cab Franc.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one, again, a little more medium bodied, so it's not super overwhelming. And this it opens up so beautifully. I really enjoy just sitting, hanging out with a glass of this, just let it open up, and really enjoy that flavor profile.
Maybe I like hard cheeses.
Yep.
With this, really nice on a day like this with just cheese and crackers and maybe a little charcuterie. As far as other foods go, smoked meats, maybe some chicken. I like grilled pork chops with this.
Yeah, I'm going more of a kind of a roasted and toasted medley of maybe eggplant, tomato, cannellini beans, mushrooms, garlic. Don't forget your garlic in there.
Jambalaya.
Jambalaya, yeah. I like to, jambalaya is a nice dish. I like to pair, spicy, vibrant wine with spicy, vibrant dishes. So, put it there with jambalaya or something. But yeah, something that's, for me, I kind of like that 1-to-1 ratio. So something that's going to be bright and complementary of the wine.
So we did bring you to Carriage House, and we need to talk naming convention. So we talked a little bit about the history of the building and whatnot. But why did we name this wine Carriage House? So that's an interesting one. I mentioned to you it was our first wine from the estate. So for us, one of the things that was important was that this first wine from the estate had a distinctively Seven Oaks farm feel to it. And we were looking at the buildings, and boy, the one that just really jumped out as something we hadn't experienced before was the Carriage House. We knew very little about it. It seemed cool. We looked into a little bit of the history and said, wow, that's a great match. The second thing about it was, you probably saw early on as we drove up and down the property and showed you where the individual properties were located. This one is kind of right in the middle. So we start out with Clover Plains, the lighter of the reds. We go down the road to Carriage House, and then to Coleman, and then to the Manor, each wine getting bigger, more full as you go down the road. So that was another piece of it. And then the other one's sort of hard to explain until you drink the wine and you see the carriage and you think to yourself, sort of this light, vibrant wine and a carriage going down the property. It just seemed to us to be that perfect fit. Hope you think so too.
Anything else?
I don't think so, other than hopefully you guys will enjoy this Carriage House. Maybe not in the Carriage House, but we look forward to having you come out here, maybe on the porch by the pool. And so one administrative item, I guess, which is if you've got questions, we're not doing this as sort of a live stream, and part of the reason for that is we don't really have Wi-Fi here in the Carriage House, and we don't have Wi-Fi out there in the pasture where we're going to do Clover Plains. So guess what? We're taping, but that doesn't mean you can't participate. Send us questions, send us comments, and we'll go over them in the next session. And hey, if we've got enough, we'll do a comments and questions section, huh?
Absolutely. Sounds good. So thanks for joining us. Clover Plains is up next. So if you've got a bottle, great. If you need a bottle, come on by for a pickup, or you can order online as well. So thanks. We'll see you next week with Clover Plains. Cheers.
Cheers.